Alright, let's dive into something that's been bubbling up in the news lately. And no, I'm not talking about the latest viral dance trend. This is way more serious. Environmental advocates in New York are pushing Governor Kathy Hochul to sign legislation banning PFAS in drinking water. Now, if you're like, PFAS? What's that? Don't worry, I've got you. PFAS, or forever chemicals, are this class of over 15,000 toxic substances that show up in everything from non-stick pans to firefighting foam. And here's the kicker. They're called forever because they don't break down in the environment. They just stick around, potentially causing all sorts of health issues like kidney cancer and low birth weights. Personally, I think the name Forever Chemicals is both genius and terrifying. It's a marketing nightmare for the companies that use them, but it's also a wake-up call for all of us. What makes this really interesting is the timing. New York has been hit with what some are calling thousand-year storms, especially in the Hudson Valley. Vanessa Fyons-Turner, the executive director of Environmental Advocates New York, points out that these heavy rains often don't get absorbed by the soil. Instead, they create runoff that carries all sorts of pollutants, including PFAS, into waterways. And it's not just from the soil. Think about all the litter and trash that gets washed away during these storms. It's like a toxic cocktail being dumped into our drinking water. If you take a step back and think about it, this isn't just a New York problem, it's a global issue. PFAS are everywhere, and these extreme weather events are becoming more common thanks to climate change. This raises a deeper question. How do we balance industrial convenience with long-term environmental and health consequences? Now, let's talk about the legislation itself. Advocates are pushing for a limit of 4 parts per trillion, 4.0 ppt, of PFAS in drinking water. Neev Moore, who works on healthy communities for Environmental Advocates New York, says this is a critical step. But here's where it gets tricky. Even if the bill passes, enforcement is key. What many people don't realize is that setting a limit is just the first step. Monitoring and actually removing these chemicals from the water supply is a whole other beast. And let's not forget the cost. Who's going to pay for all this? Taxpayers? The companies that used PFAS in the first place? This is where things get messy, and it's why I'm keeping a close eye on how this plays out. One thing that immediately stands out is the political angle. The bill was sponsored by Democratic State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, who framed it as a response to the Trump administration rolling back federal protections. From my perspective, this highlights how environmental policy often gets caught in the crossfire of partisan politics. But here's the thing, clean water shouldn't be a partisan issue. It's a basic human right. Yet, here we are, with advocates having to fight for something that seems so fundamentally necessary. What this really suggests is that we need a more unified, national approach to dealing with PFAS, rather than leaving it up to individual states. And then there's the algal blooms issue. PFAS don't just contaminate water, they can also promote the growth of harmful algal blooms, which can devastate ecosystems and make water unsafe for both humans and wildlife. A detail I find fascinating is how interconnected these environmental issues are. It's not just about PFAS. It's about how these chemicals interact with other pollutants and natural systems. This isn't a single problem, it's a web of problems that all feed into each other. In my opinion, this is why we need holistic solutions, not just piecemeal fixes. So, where does this leave us? Governor Hochul's office says she's committed to protecting water quality and will review the legislation. But the question is, will she sign it? And even if she does, will it be enough? Personally, I think this is just the beginning of a much larger conversation about how we regulate and manage toxic chemicals in our environment. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem, but I also see a lot of hope in the fact that people are paying attention. Awareness is the first step toward change. So, what do you think? Is this legislation a step in the right direction, or is it too little too late? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.